Coming up, the true contenders are starting to separate themselves from the pack. We'll catch you up on last week's action from North and South Dakota.
And Lee Timmerman of KFYR Television joins us to talk some Bismarck area football.
And we'll take a closer look at some of the best games on this week's slate and make our picks for a handful of those. All that and more coming up right now on Varsity Sports. And how is everybody doing? Alongside Jason Andera, I am Jay Elson. Well, Jason, for me, high school football, absolutely one of my favorite things to cover. I know that's certainly the case with you as well, but every once in a while, we are reminded that it is just a game, and a dangerous one at that. And Friday night, we got one of those reminders during the Rapid City-Stevens Sioux Falls-Roosevelt game, certainly one of the scariest situations you are ever going to come across on a high school football field, or any football field for that matter. Late in the game, Rough Riders linebacker Pearson Evans went in to make a tackle, and he did not get up. Now, medical staff tended to him on the field for about a half an hour, and they would actually call the game off due to the emotional nature of that injury. And we've since learned that a stinger caused Evans to lose all feeling in his body for more than 10 minutes. He did regain some of that feeling in his fingers before he was stretchered off and taken to a local hospital for observation. And we are happy to report that Evans has since regained all feeling in his extremities and is expected to make a full recovery. That's certainly great news, Jason. But again, this was a scary deal. His teammates were visibly shaken. So as a team, after seeing something like this, how do you move on?
Well, it is very tough. I mean, like Coach Kim Nelson told me earlier this week, it is just a coach's worst nightmare to see that going on the field. But throughout the process, that half-hour delay during the middle of that game, doctors were very optimistic through the whole time that he would be able to get a full recovery, even as he laid there without feeling in his body. So that gave a little bit of a positive tone, but obviously lots of tears shed on the field. I think just having Pearson come back and wanting to come back and play right away is going to give that team a boost. It is homecoming week for Roosevelt. That's going to give them a boost. I think it's going to tell a lot to see how this team bounces back after such a traumatic injury.
Whether or not he does play remains to be seen.
He wants
certainly
to, but
an
we'll see
encouraging sign that he's even got the desire
Yeah.
after dealing with something like that himself. We certainly wish Pearson the best. Realize that the game on Friday was pretty much an afterthought after all of that, but that is where we're going to kick off our weekly South Dakota Rewind. Tyson Jan had another big night for Roosevelt as he found pay dirt 3 times in the first half. Jet Thune solid as well as Roosevelt cruised to a 40-9 win over Stevens.
The Washington Warriors moved the ball quickly and with authority on their way to a 35-0 lead in the first quarter. The backups got a lot of time after that Washington dominating start and sealed a big win, 62-9 on Rapid City Central's homecoming.
O'Gorman went old school on Friday. The Knights called 18 straight running plays to set the tone for their 42-10 rout of Watertown. OG also got a boost from the return of Boston Bauer, who played in his first game since recovering from a broken ankle. All Bauer did was run for a touchdown on his very first carry.
I mean, outside, and got sealed, cut up, made another move, and then it was open from there. It feels amazing to come back to have the first play be a touchdown, obviously, but, I mean, we worked hard as a team and all the talk and stuff like that, but this is for sure a team that can win it all.
Lincoln ended their short 2-game skid with another shutout over Aberdeen Central, 28-0 in their homecoming game. Lee Ransom lit it up with 2 electrifying touchdowns, one on an inside reverse, one on an excellent catch from quarterback Cole DeBurr.
It's just trying to find the pieces with what, kind of what we have left once, we get the MASH unit taken care of. We hope to be playing even better football, but tonight was definitely important to get a win, survive the whole homecoming week, and we did that.
Yeah, it's really good that we bounced back from 2 losses, kind of down, kind of beat up with a lot of guys out, but a lot of people stepped up and we got a win. I think that's a really good momentum boost for us as we go into next week.
Last season, Yankton came into Pierre and left with a 37-0 win. Well, this time, the Gubs flipped the script. Brevin Kaiser threw for a score and took an interception back to the house as Pierre solidifies their #1 ranking by shutting out the defending 11AA champs 31-0.
Nothing like it. We lost last year, that was tough. This bad taste in our mouth, but I'm so proud of our guys, I can't even explain to you.
Brandon Valley's Andrew Sorensen didn't blow up the box score, but he did blow up the Harrisburg Tigers from his linebacker spot. The rest of the Lynx followed Sorensen's lead and shut down the Harrisburg offense with their 30-6 win. Junior quarterback Alex Waltner had his second 200-plus yard passing day in as many weeks for the Lynx, as they now advance to their first winning record of the season.
Our defense, we gave up some yards, but it seemed like they got some big turnovers at key times. And offensively, I thought we started off great. We took the first drive down and scored and things like that. And we kind of sputtered a little bit maybe in the second quarter, but I think we figured some things out at halftime. And if we could just get the ball back, and I felt pretty good about what we could do offensively once we got the ball back.
A pair of unbeaten teams tangled in Rapid City, but this one was all St. Thomas More. The Cavaliers dismantled Custer by a count of 57-13. Jake Andrews scored the first 2 touchdowns of the night for STM, while junior quarterback Preston Arity had another near-flawless night at quarterback. He was 17-20 for 232 yards and 2 touchdowns.
Roncalli made the short trip east to take on the undefeated Groton Tigers. It was a battle for field position much of the night, but Braden Summers ran one in from 4 yards to break the scoring struggle. Roncalli would then add 2 more touchdowns late in the game to get a hard-fought 18-0 win over Groton.
This is a huge win for us tonight. Groton Tigers is a great team, physical team, but I feel like tonight we matched them for intensity and we came out, we played good, and we got the big plays when we needed them, and we got the win tonight.
The game of the night on the 9-man scoreboard, Jason, featured teams that were ranked 3rd and 4th respectively in your power rankings, and Woonsocket, Wessington Springs, Sanborn Central gets an impressive 44-20 win over their region rivals from Mount Vernon Plankinton.
Yeah, Landon Oshner played an outstanding game, and the Blackhawks really looked like, just as good as those top 2 teams in my power rankings right now. Another big game was a ranked team between Wolsey Wessington taking on Gregory, and Wolsey Wessington left no room for interpretation. They're definitely the better team.
Got to mention Canastota as well. They still haven't given up a point this year.
Yeah, they haven't given up a point. They got a big test this week against Mount Vernon Plankinton. I think they might give up their first points of the year, but that defense has been outstanding.
Yeah, they have. That's kind of been their MO over the last few years. Well, anyway, our varsity game ball normally goes to the player that puts together the top individual effort on a given week, but that is not the case here.
Too hard to pick. That Pier defense came out and made a big splash. 7 takeaways, 5 of those interceptions, 2 by Lane Hone, 3 more by Brevin Kaiser. He took 1 back to the house. And, of course, they shut out the Yankton offense. That's an offense that had been averaging nearly 30 points per game entering the game, so huge feat for the Governor defense. And Brevin Kaiser had this to say after the game about that defensive effort.
Just read my keys. Our coaches prepared us really good. They knew what they were going to run, and our defense is what won us the game tonight.
Let's take a quick look now at some of the individuals that we had to consider for this week's game ball. And Keegan Van Egdom is on this list every week.
Yeah, this week puts up just 12 rushing attempts in going against a team like Flandre, who really had trouble stopping players this year. But how much better can he do than that? 249 yards, 3 more touchdowns. There were a couple big performances like that. Branson Taylor of Douglas scored all their touchdowns in their game as they beat Sturgis with 247 on the ground. We could go through all of these.
Yeah.
These are all been outstanding performances.
Spencer Negebauer leads Mitchell in a shootout win over Spearfish as well with 3 touchdowns and a big night on the ground as well. But a lot of good guys that deserve a little time at least in the spotlight here this week. All right, well, that is a look at things how things shook out last week in South Dakota. When we come back, we're going to recap the week up north. Stay with us.
Varsity Sports on Midco Sports Network is presented by Mitchell Technical Institute and Shields.
And welcome back. Well, we have surveyed the scene in South Dakota. Now it's time to do the same as we hit the rewind button on all of last week's action from North Dakota. Minot overcame 3 first-quarter interceptions to defeat the Mandan Braves 35-20. Magi turned to the ground game as Austin Nagel grinded out 207 yards and 2 touchdowns. The team piled up 314 yards on the ground.
Not many teams can throw 3 picks in the first quarter and come back and win. Good job by the Magi. Well, West Fargo, they spoiled Fargo North's homecoming with a commanding 42-0 win. Chase Tyken ran for 92 yards, 4 more touchdowns as the Packers played one of their most complete games of the season.
Bismarck handed Williston its first region loss in emphatic fashion. The Demons got over the half-century mark for the second time this season in a 55-0 win. They held the Coyotes to just 32 yards of total offense in the process.
For the second time in the last 2 weeks, Cheyenne had a chance to win the game in the final minute. Josh Rorick hits Cole Christensen for a 30-yard touchdown late in the fourth. The Mustangs intended to go for two, but after they had a penalty on them, they changed their minds, backed up for the kick, and the Rough Riders came up big to block the extra point, and they hold on for their first win of the season, a 7-6 win for the Rough Riders.
Good for them. It was a little long overdue, I think. Meanwhile, points coming fast and furious for Fargo Davies. Ty Jokum set the pace with 101 yards on the ground and 3 scores as the Eagles soar past Grand Forks Central 54-6.
And it was Richland who trailed by 2 at halftime, but Trevor Flaw got the Colts back in it with a big second half. He caught a 77 and an 81-yard touchdown reception. That pulled him ahead 26-14, but Hankinson held tough until the end. It was 2 big fourth-quarter stops by Richland's defense that ended up securing the game for the Colts. They get the win 32-28 and stay unbeaten.
It means so much because they're a great team. And then dealing with all that adversity. We had 4 turnovers in the second half, and we came back from that, stopped them at the goal line, and won this game.
This was a real test. This really put us on the spot. We had to play a hard 4-quarter game today. And I think we played a good game. They definitely brought their game. It was an awesome game to play.
On an individual front, no one in North Dakota had a bigger night than Grant County Flashers Lane Wells on Friday, Jason. He gets our varsity game ball.
Yeah, Lane Wells, just a sophomore, had the biggest night of his young varsity career, going over 300 yards on the ground, 3 touchdowns. They needed every one of those yards, every one of those touchdowns to get that win over Beach, 38-20.
Meanwhile, an impressive group of honorable mention candidates this week, as always. How about Carson Zarek from Wahpeton, accounting for more than 400 yards of total offense?
How would you like getting almost 200 yards rushing out of your quarterback? And he's also able to go over 200 in the passing game. Tough to shut down an offense that has a leader like that.
All right, well, coming up, we're going to preview and make our picks for some of this week's biggest games. But first, KFYR TV's Lee Timmerman is going to join us to talk about how things are shaping up in and around Bismarck. Coming up next.
Varsity Sports on Midco Sports Network is presented by Mitchell Technical Institute and Shields.
Bismarck is always a high school football hotbed, and that is certainly the case once again here in 2015, maybe even a little farther outside of town than we're used to at this point. For a little bit more on that, we're going to bring in KFYR TV's Lee Timmerman to talk a little bit about what's going on there in the capital city and around the capital city in high school football. And Lee, the WDA has been a little bit of a surprise so far this year. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how surprised are you that Dickinson is unbeaten through 5 weeks?
Well, I think at first glance, people would say a 10, but I think once you look at it, it should probably be about a 5, because the Midgets just, they vastly improved from a team that had a lot of players that played. The win over Bismarck obviously proved that the Midgets were more physical than probably everyone expected. But Tyrell Harris, when he moved in from Texas, he had that potential, I guess, touchdown anytime he gets the ball. And then having a big senior class obviously helps with the wins, but a lot of that senior class is the offense and defensive line, and we all know how important that is to football. So I'd say about a 5.
All right, let's talk about some Bismarck teams. Both Century and Bismarck High have to be a little disappointed in where they're at in the standings, don't they?
I would say, first off, the one thing is I don't think there's an outstanding team in the state. So with that being said, there could be potential for a lot of movement. I mean, there's not a BHS or a Fargo South, who has been at their recent peak, but Minot, definitely the top team in the WDA. So I don't think it's a surprise to find the Demons with a loss. But Century, I think, is in a pretty bad spot with the 2 losses right now, tied for 5th. The Patriots have Dickinson this week, still have to play Bismarck. So, yeah, the Patriots have to be disappointed.
Lee, how about St. Mary's and Shiloh Christian now? Both of these teams made it to the finals last season, and from what you've seen so far this year, should the expectations be a return to the big game?
I would say yes. But of those two, I think St. Mary's has fewer good teams to go through in the region. So their path there, albeit difficult, maybe not quite as difficult with the depth. They have a season-ending game against Valley City. I think that's going to be really, really interesting. But Shiloh, I think, is better than I thought they would be. They're more physical than I thought they would be. But Zach Martin has just raised his game a lot. The passing game is solid. But we all know that, once you get into the playoffs, you usually have to be able to run the ball sometime to make it to that championship game. But Shiloh's wins over the three undefeated teams, Napoleon, Gackle Streeter, Strasburg, Zeeland, Linton, HMB, those were three really impressive wins that had to make believers out of anyone.
All right, that again is KFYR TV's Lee Timmerman, and certainly Lee, we depend on him a lot. He helps us out a ton up in the Bismarck area.
He does, and he does a great job, a very trusted source for high school information
Absolutely.
in the Bismarck area.
And sports in general, for that matter. Well, coming up, another Football Friday, fast approaching. We're going to give you the game plan for this week's episode of Varsity Sports Live, and we're going to also preview some of the matchups we'll be covering. That's next.
Varsity Sports on Midco Sports Network is presented by Mitchell Technical Institute and Shields.
Well, much like the teams we cover, we draw up a game plan each and every week here at Midco Sports Network, and we try to execute it to the best of our abilities on Friday night during Varsity Sports Live. The difference is we're not afraid to share that game plan with you ahead of time. In fact, we're glad to do it. So with that, here's a look at the games our talented team is going to be headed out to this week for Varsity Sports Live. And right at the top of this list, Jason, actually a Thursday night battle at Howard Wood Field between Pierre and Sioux Falls, Washington.
Yeah, they moved the game up to Thursday. There's a big concert coming into Sioux Falls later on Friday night, so they already have one game. So they're going to play a Thursday night special, and it's going to be a good one. The top team in AA taking on one of the best teams in AAA, a really good defense in Pierre, taking on Washington, who have really been clicking on offense lately. Looking forward to this one. We get to make our picks on this one next segment.
Absolutely. Look forward to that. Meanwhile, Friday night, a lot of eyes are going to be tuned into that game in Yankton between O'Gorman and the Bucks, because not so much necessarily because they want to see the competition, but they want to see if Steve Keeter can equal Max Hawk's all-time wins record and do it in Yankton.
Steve Keeter is one of those guys who just sticks to his game plan week in, week out, and it's gotten him a ton of wins over his career. He has a chance to tie it in the place where Max Hawk set that record, and it's going to be fun to see. That will be our game of the week, by the way. It'll be on TV next Wednesday.
Yeah, you really can't write a much better story for than that. All right, switching over to North Dakota now. Dickinson's going to put their perfect record on the line again as they visit Century. The last time, remember, that they played on this field, they handed Bismarck High its first regular season loss since 2011.
Yeah, Century comes in knowing that they really need a signature win in the WDA. This would definitely be considered a signature win for them. They're coming off a good week, but they had played Legacy last week. We'll see how they really address the competition, the physicality that they're going to see against the Midgets.
Yeah, well, you know where our cameras are going to be on Friday now. What you don't know is which way Jason and I are leaning on some of those matchups, and that's going to change right after this.
Varsity Sports on Midco Sports Network is presented by Mitchell Technical Institute and Shields.
All right, we wrap things up once again with another round of Pigskin Pick'em. It's awfully fun, Jason. We had an awfully good week last week. I'm not going to lie to you.
We're going to look back at the history books, and we're not going to see one as good as that. 4-0, both got our upset picks right.
Yeah, probably the first time that's ever happened where we've been undefeated and nailed the upsets. Can we do it again? That's the ultimate question. Let's get going. 2 in South Dakota, starting with that Thursday night matchup we mentioned in the preview segment, Pierre at Washington. Who do you like?
I don't know if there's quarterbacks playing better than Brevin Kaiser and Jack Skelhaus right now. Both have been ultra efficient, great leaders for their teams. I think it's going to come down to physicality, which both teams are physical. I think Washington's just a little bit bigger. I think they win by 1 touchdown.
I like Washington by a couple of scores, and Pierre obviously coming off that emotional win over Yankton. They wanted to make a statement against the Bucks. So often, though, we see a team have a bit of a letdown the next week, and you cannot afford to do that against Washington. Not saying Pierre will do that. I'm saying they could do that. I like Washington either way. In 11A, good matchup between undefeated teams here in Sioux Falls Christian as they travel to Madison.
2 outstanding second-half teams. Madison just beats people up, and in the fourth quarter puts them away with some big plays. Sioux Falls Christian just grinds at you on the ground. I think Madison, though, has a few more playmakers. I know I've said that before, but they just have more playmakers than the rest of this class.
I'm interested to see if Sioux Falls Christian can run the football, because that's what they do. If they can do that, it's going to limit the possession, maybe keep that game close. I don't know if they can do it, though. I like Madison as well.
Okay.
Dickinson at Century. The Midgets trying to stay undefeated here.
You know what? Just got done talking about physical teams these last two games. Again, we're talking about Dickinson, probably the most physical team in the WDA. That's why they've been winning. Tyrell Harris has done an outstanding job running the ball for them. I think they just have too many weapons to beat, to lose. So I think Midgets win once again.
Dickinson had a bit of an aberration last week offensively. They went to sleep a bit against Jamestown, but I think they wake back up here and get the win for the second time in the Community Bowl in Bismarck against Century. How about Grand Forks, Red River, and Davies?
Well, I said last week Grand Forks, Red River had a chance to run the table, and it starts here. This will be their toughest game in that run. They've got to go to Davies and get a win, but I think they can do it.
Their defense had let them down this year. They've been giving up far too many points. Last week we saw them step up. Ironically, the offense, which had been piling up points, was nowhere to be found. Can they get the best out of both this week? If they can, I like them to get the win at Davies. Quickly upset picks.
I got Tioga over Divide County. Divide County hasn't lost in the region yet, but Tioga come off a few big wins. I think they get the upset.
In South Dakota Class 11A, I like Del Rapids, just 1-4, the defending state champs, over Canton. The Seahawks 3-2. Warriors have only scored over 7 points in one game this year. That was their one win against Vermilion, 35-6. I think they changed that and get the win over the Seahawks. All right, for Jason Andera, I'm Jay Elson. Thanks for watching. Remember to bring it back here Friday night for another episode of Varsity Sports Live.